I always believed that film was made for fantasy because it's a condensation and of telling a story, like a storybook. I like fantasy. It appeals to me. I remember my mother bought me a set of books when I was very young called the Wonder Books, and it showed how long it would take to go to Mars or to Venus, a theory, of course. And they had beautiful illustrations, and I think that got me interested in fantasy at a very early age. And then we used to go to German films. I remember seeing Metropolis and this girl sitting there transferring her life force from a living girl to the robot, and these big rings going up and down. That stuck in my mind for years. I used to make little dioramas, I guess you'd call them dioramas, of the La Brea tar pits. And when I saw King Kong, I saw how you could make them move. So I got interested in stop motion, and after months, it didn't happen overnight. I didn't say, eureka, I'm going to do it. It just sort of wandered in. And I was fascinated by movement and creating life in an artificial being. I know in the early days, the fantasy films were very few and in between. Everybody strives for realism. Well, what's the point of putting something too real on the screen? Then you might as well go out in the garden and watch the people go by. I remember our art teacher used to say, take a look-see. And a lot of people look, but they never see. And that means, you know, some people sit down with their head cocked and other people sit down straight. And it gives a character that is very difficult to define. I didn't want to do the whole thing. I thought I'd water myself down. And because the animation in itself takes a lot of time and thought. And you have to have a lot of it in your mind, and you have to have good memory. The older you get, the more your memory deteriorates. So I'm taking fish oil to try to counteract that. I wore many different hats, but I never took credit. In the early days, I was very modest, and I didn't want to have Harryhausen, so I was modest. And it took me 50 years almost to discover that modesty is not a good word in Hollywood. I had to learn that the first take has got to be important. And I think 9/10 of everything you see on the screen in all 15 films of ours is the first take. I can't really advise anybody. They just have to have patience and not get discouraged too easily. That's one of the drawbacks of this profession. You can get discouraged if you're not careful by people being indifferent to what you have and want to put on the screen. I used to get letters from fans who say, where can I get someone to make the models? Where can I get somebody to cover them? Where can I get somebody? And you wonder what they're going to do. And everybody wants to be a chief, but nobody wants to be an Indian. We photographed a real gorilla in the Chicago Zoo. We sent somebody back there, and he was the only gorilla, I think, in captivity at the time. And all he did was walk across the screen, sit down, and pick his nose. And you couldn't show that on the screen.
Okay, I think that wraps it up for today.
Good. Happy day.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.